Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad.
The cutting Jonas lays it in. Valanciunas taking over the third.
The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Welcome to the Pelicans Podcast. I am Joe Cardosi, joined by the Soigné, Jim Eichenhofer. Jim, we've got a lot to discuss. Not a lot of juicy, fun info, but important info. If you're a Pelicans fan, we've got a lot of factors to look at, a couple of losses to look at. We're going to try to make it cheery and informative as we do so.
And I've already written down a note to look up what Soigné means after the broadcast. I don't even know if I pronounced that right.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
But no, you're right. I mean, this was a tough weekend. There's no two ways about it. I thought Friday's game was really frustrating the way that it ended in terms of you had a chance to win and a lot of execution issues in the last couple minutes allowed Houston to be in position to win the game, and they totally capitalized and took advantage of that. So credit to them. Sunday was just a one-sided defeat. There was no way you could walk out of the arena and be like, well, if they had just done this and this differently, they wouldn't able to win.
Time machine, whatever. Yeah.
So overall, I mean, obviously things are not good right now. They've lost 5 games in a row after they started 4-1. I kind of look at it from a big picture standpoint 2 ways. One, I think it's a little bit unreasonable to act like the sky is falling and everything is horrible based on the fact that there's so many guys that they don't have right now.
Yes.
We've talked about this a lot the last few years, unfortunately. But I do think that, so on one hand, I think the people who are saying, like, tear it all apart, everything's horrible, everything's going to pieces, I think they need to slow down a little bit. But
and also, those people have probably said it about 14 times before now.
Right. So on the other hand, the but that I'll throw in there is it reasonable to think that the results should be better the last week plus based on who they do have available?
Yes.
And I think that is reasonable.
Absolutely.
So somewhere in the middle there is the perspective that I'm trying to bring today of that no one's happy that they've lost 5 games in a row. No one should be happy.
Right.
But at the same time, I do think that you need to take a deep breath and a step back a little bit and just be like, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit more later, of some of the specific problems that they're having that can be and will be addressed when some of these players come back to the court.
Yeah, and you have to also look at the schedule. We sort of discussed it jokingly, but it was true. It was a murderer's row coming up. You looked at the schedule and it's like, where's the easy stretch? It isn't there. And you're not going to get any sympathy from teams because you don't have any Trey Murphy. You're out a few players. Well, that doesn't matter to them. They smell blood in the water. They're going to take advantage, especially with the in-season tournament stuff going on, with the importance of these early season games. Seems like there's no nights off. And, the Pelicans did have a couple guys back. We were happy for that, but man, those gaps in the lineup are heavy.
No, you're right. I mean, other teams across the league do not care. And at the end of the season, when you finish in whatever place you do, no one's like, well, we finished 3rd, but we probably would have finished 7th
if
all these other teams had been healthy. Like, no one cares.
Right.
So that's not going to happen. There's not going to be anyone that's like, oh, we feel bad for the Pelicans. So that's definitely true. In terms of the timing and, like, hoping for a break or hoping for a little bit of a breather, you're right. I mean, they played the Mavericks last night, second best team in the West. Play them again on Tuesday. Yeah. Play the best team in the West on Friday. Play the third best team on Saturday, Minnesota. So, I mean, somehow, thanks NBA.
Appreciate that.
They have the 3 top teams in the West coming in. Now, on the flip side, to me, before the homestand started and before last night's game occurred where they were down 30 or whatever it was, and ended up losing pretty handily, I thought the timing of the homestand was really good.
Yeah.
In terms of now you're getting to unpack your suitcase, you're going to get to be home all the way up until Thanksgiving. They're not going to leave again until basically Thanksgiving evening. They're going to fly to LA to play them on Black Friday. But you have to take advantage of that. Just because you have home games doesn't mean that anything positive is going to guaranteed to happen. You have to go out there on the floor and take care of it.
Yeah, so we're going to need people to pack the stands and make that home court advantage mean something. When you are losing these tough games against this murderer's row of a schedule, you're learning that these games are meaningful early in season. If you can weather this storm and get whole later, I feel like you will have exercised a lot of the demons that could be a bugaboo this season. You could basically be forged in flames early. If we can get whole and we see that we're not completely buried this early in the season, can still make hay.
Yeah, and I think short term, the big negative of you have guys like, say you have somebody who you thought was going to be your 8th or 9th man and now he's starting.
Yeah.
The negative of that is in a lot of cases I do feel like the Pelicans are, and it's not by choice, they're putting players in positions where they have to do more than anyone expected going into the year. Their roles are bigger, their minutes are bigger. Right. I mean, I don't think anyone thought that Jordan Hawkins would be playing, 40 minutes in some games this year.
Yeah, I don't think Jordan did either.
Right. Dyson Daniels will be in the starting lineup with him, also playing 40-plus minutes, also being the guy in the Houston game where he's the one that has to make sure that they get into their offense. They have to get organized. In clutch time, you have some of the biggest possessions of the season so far through the first 10 games, and he's the one that's running everything. So the bad part of it is, like I said, you're going to have to live with some of the mistakes and some of the growing pains that happen.
Play out of position.
Right.
Yeah.
The good news is long term, though, you would think that, like I think the phrase you used was forged in fire, that it's going to help these guys along the road where, down later in the season when some of these players are in more roles that they're accustomed to, especially at this early stage of their career, then I think some of these experiences will definitely benefit them. But I mean,
it's a tough way to learn being thrown in the deep end, but they're going to learn.
You might have some losses here or there, and you might have some games like Fridays, which to me was very frustrating.
Yeah, I think Fridays burns a little more because it was so in hand. It felt like so many times, and for it to slip away that quickly and that precipitously, it just felt like you're hanging on a ledge about to climb over, and just the ground came out from under you. I don't know who to blame it on.
Dylan Brooks. You probably want to blame it on him.
Yes,
I know you.
I want to blame it on Dylan Brooks. Anything that's wrong in the world is probably Dylan Brooks' fault. But yeah, it just felt like you could have had it, and it just slipped away so quickly.
Yeah, and I hate to go back to things that happened in previous seasons. You want to start fresh, but to me, part of what was nagging about that game was it seems like on the road the last couple years, they've had games in particular where the last 2 minutes have been so damaging and so frustrating. And also, I mean, in the last maybe 45 seconds of that game where you're up, I think they were up 5, and then really the only way that you can lose that game in regulation is if everything goes perfectly for Houston.
Yes.
So Van Vliet makes a 3.
I was about to say those back-to-back Van Vliet threes.
Yep.
To me, that was like, uh-oh.
Right.
I don't feel safe anymore.
Yeah, no.
And it just went downhill from there.
And it's funny, too. When he was with Toronto, the Pelicans only played him twice a year at the most.
Yeah.
And it still felt like, however long his career's been, it feels like it's been 10 times that he's done that to New Orleans, which I don't think is even mathematically possible. But just seeing him, I was like, oh, God, now he's on Houston. Now he's in the same division.
Yep.
So it's going to be 4 games against him. You just don't want to let the game be close and have him on the court because it feels like he always comes through for
he's
whatever
just such
team he's
a
on.
game changer. He's just such a wild card. There are 14 lead changes in that game. I mean, it felt like every bit of that. New Orleans had 18 turnovers to the Mavs 9 turnovers. I guess that makes a big difference in the last game as well. Turnovers felt different. Felt like a big difference in that Rockets game as well.
Yeah. The timing of them.
The timing of that. That's not specifically the volume. And you saw flashes of good in that game. It was a good Jonas game until he fouled out. Had a good BI game, just not enough BI. It's
right.
It just you saw those sparks of what New Orleans could be, and the way it fell apart. I understand why fans just had a sick taste in their mouth after that one.
Yeah, and I always go back to in the NBA too with a 48-minute game and 24-second shot clock. It's not about what you can do; it's about what you can repeatedly do.
Yeah.
And so that was a game where it felt like they were the better team for maybe 45 minutes, but then the last 3 minutes they couldn't hold the lead. So I think that just piled on to what made me, just upset after that game was over. That was definitely the worst I felt after a game this season. And then I'm sure we'll talk about this too later in the show, but the fact that it was part of the in-season tournament to me was even more damaging because you know how precious you only play 4 games in the group stage of in-season tournament. So, I mean, that was such a huge swing that they weren't able to get that win.
Absolutely. And we talked so much about the importance of the in-season tournament and how maybe it's going to be a learning process for teams to adjust to the pressure of how important those games are. And boy, that felt like flunking a test on that one because, again, it was more important than the others, and it felt like you could sort of ride the crest of the wave out, and boy, did it crash hard. And you know what? I guess let's just go ahead and talk about it. 136-124 Mavs over Pels.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Dallas started the game was kind of demoralizing from a morale standpoint of the fact that they scored 67 points in the first half, and it felt like Luka and Kyrie were pretty much able to do whatever they wanted, whether it was Luka kind of toying with defenders and taking step-back threes, and then Kyrie getting to the basket. I mean, we know he's one of the best ball handlers of all time. Some people say he's the number one in the history of the game.
You, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
But it was like I noticed a couple times that guys were trying to play him to his strong side, which he's right-handed, but he was just going left and going right to the basket, getting all the way through the paint and getting to the rim for a crafty layup. So, yeah, they look really good. I know there's probably some people that were skeptical about them after the first couple weeks of the season.
And they are really good.
Yeah.
They're going to be.
I mean, those two guys are so talented, but last season, after they came together, the team was not good.
Right.
I mean, some of that you definitely have to chalk up to they needed to do a better job of surrounding them with the right kind of players, and it seems like they've done that so far this season. Some of the shooting that they've added around them, I think, helps a ton. Mm-hmm. But and also some of the defense. They were a terrible defensive team last year. So sometimes when you say, like, well, we have Kyrie and Luka, we're going to score 125, but it's like, well, if you give up 130, you're still going to lose the game.
Yeah, I mean, we've said that. We got B.I. and Zion. You know, you can score. You can have a duo. You got to do a lot of things around it.
Yep.
And you talked about, Kyrie slashing to the paint, which was tough for our defenders to deal with. But Kyrie hit 7 of 10 threes. Part of his 35 points.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seemed like there was no way they could stop him or defend him. He just got pretty much whatever he wanted.
And he actually was off to a bad shooting start to the season. So it's like, well, gee, great. Now this is the game that he's going to break out and make all of his threes. So, yeah, I don't think many of them were wide open either. So I don't think you can say, well, the defense did a terrible job on him, and that's why he went crazy.
Yeah.
So he just had a great game. I mean, we've seen him do that a lot throughout his career.
And I read somewhere before the game he was talking to the locker room before the team saying, guys, I'm tired. I'm really tired. You're going to have to prop me up. And Luka Doncic himself said that was BS. But whatever he said in the locker room, I don't know if he actually was tired or what, but it seemed to work. Luka had 30 points of his own, and his team did rally behind him. Now, B.I. led NOLA with 20 points. Zion had 18. That did feel good, to see those guys getting points. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, the Pelicans, the last couple of years, really just the last 2 seasons, it's not been... There haven't been that many games like this, which I would consider last season's Mavs, where you have the individual players you mentioned that have good games, but it's still not close to enough because of how poorly you did on defense. So, I mean, there's no way that you couldn't just pinpoint the defense. That was the problem last night. Yeah. Pelicans shot 51% from the field and actually shot threes really well at 47%. But a lot of that was in the fourth quarter. Yeah. So I think those numbers were a little bit misleading because while the game was still, contested, those percentages were lower. But still, overall, those are really good numbers. And so, I mean, it was totally the defensive end. It was totally... fast break points, for example, was 28-13 in Dallas's favor. One of the things that Willie Green mentioned after the game was he said we need to change ends better from offense to defense and defense to offense.
Yeah.
I mean, the offense to defense thing to me is obvious. And I actually tweeted this out last night too, that it's never been more important to be on your game in terms of transition defense because compared to even a few years ago, other teams, the whole league is playing so much faster. Yeah. So you're going to get burned if you're not running back on defense and getting to your spots.
That's showing up a lot more, it seems like.
For sure. And also, this happened a couple times where they did run back, but they weren't matched up properly.
Yeah.
And sometimes when the first step is getting back on defense. The second step is making sure that everyone is assigned to a guy. And the problem now with, maybe 15, 20 years ago, if you weren't matched up, you might give up a dunk or a layup. Now you're giving up a lot of wide open threes. Yeah. And that happened a lot last night where the Mavericks push the ball, you're not back, they get an open three. Yeah. It's just more of a killer than it used to be because of the fact that some of these teams have so many good three-point shooters, and they're willing to take 53 like Dallas did last night.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the volume seems to be the name of the game. That's the Jimfo we need. And as it seems like we're gonna get a quick scouting report because coming up, our next opponent seems to be. Let me check. Mavs. See him right there again. Boy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously the bad part about that is that they're on fire right now. They're 8-2. They're putting up points at a ridiculous rate. I think the good part is, though, I think you hopefully will have a little bit more motivation that you just lost to them and now you're playing them again.
And you've shown yourself that you can hang with them to a certain degree if you lock in.
Right.
And another little bonus, at home, which is going to be nice for the fans. And it's another little added bonus if you need a chance to rah-rah, in-season tournament game.
Yes, it is. And, we talked about the Houston game, how obviously the Pelicans are 0-1 in West Group B so far. Really, this game for both teams Tuesday in terms of the in-season tournament is kind of make or break because, as we've discussed before, once you have 2 losses, your chances are only slightly better than winning the lottery, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the NBA lottery. I mean the actual state lottery.
Yeah, hey, look, my pockets are bulging with tickets still.
Yeah. But, no, I think the Mavericks lost to Denver in their first in-season tournament game. So both of these teams are in a position where it's like they have to win this game.
It's
a very you can almost cross whichever team loses this game, you can almost cross off and say like, okay, now they don't have a chance. They don't have a realistic chance. It is possible mathematically that you can go 2-2 in your group and still
to proceed
advance
mathematically with possible. It's generally not good.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
So that part of it is something to watch and something to think about for Tuesday. And then, Friday is also an in-season tournament game. They have Denver coming in here.
Yes.
If the Pelicans win out, I know this is a big if, but they win out, they might have a decent chance of making it to the quarterfinals and then win that game, and you and I are headed to the Las Vegas Strip.
Yeah, yes.
And I know everyone wants to see that.
Oh, yes. There will be a documentary, Jim out in Vegas. It's going to look like a Fear and Loathing, just
And then Saturday is Minnesota Timberwolves, who, I mentioned earlier, off to a great start. Mm-hmm. And that the list of games actually reminds me that my player to watch last week was Jordan Hawkins. Yeah. I think that was a good pick.
I was just looking up this stat I saw recently. Brett Usher tweeted, Jordan Hawkins has made more three-pointers, 25, than any other player in NBA history over the first 9 games of their career. Call it now. Over the first 9 games, best to ever do it. Look, I'm not diminishing it. I mean, that average is going to. That's pretty impressive for the kid.
Yeah.
We've been telling him to pull the trigger. Of course, Coach Green has, and it's been paying dividends.
And I think it speaks to a lot of just how aggressive he is. That he's able to get up enough threes,
and that he listens to the podcast and heard that you're his player of the week.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think. I was worried that was going to put a little bit too much pressure on him, but knowing how he is and what we've seen so far in the first month of his career, I'm not surprised at all that he totally responded to it and was like, you know what, I'm going to come through for Jim. I'm going to deliver. I'm going to set an NBA record while I'm at it. Why not?
Yes.
So good work by him.
Good job speaking it into existence too, Jim.
And so my player to watch for this week, which we're up to week 4 of the NBA schedule, is going to be Jonas Valanciunas. He has a rematch on Tuesday with Derek Lively II. Lively had 10 points, only had 2 rebounds, had 5 fouls, so not bad as far as what the Pelicans did.
So a little emphasis on centers here.
Against him, right, exactly. And then, so that's Tuesday's game. Then Jonas is going to go up against Jokic on Friday. NBA Finals MVP. A lot of people think he's the MVP front runner. Yeah, he's pretty good. And then Saturday, you're talking about Rudy Gobert of Minnesota. So
another guy who's good at basketball.
Yeah, a lot of 7-footers this week, and a lot of guys that are like to do a lot of work in the paint. Jokic does damage everywhere, but Lively and Gobert are definitely players that are a lot more comfortable kind of hanging around the basket, blocking shots, rebounding, and when they do score, a lot of it's gonna be off alley-oops and dunks and follow-ups, stuff like that.
Well, I don't envy Jonas's job this week, but it's going to be very important. And you know what? The people need to feel better. I feel like we've done a lot of, not doomsaying, but we have had to talk about a lot of teams that are coming in here with something to prove. Of course, the Pelicans have something to prove. We don't have every bullet in the chamber. We are a little shorthanded.
Right.
But I still think there are reasons that the Pelicans can make hay in this little stretch. Again, we're going to be at home. There is extra motivation, especially after falling one time in that in-season tournament. And again, Jordan Hawkins, I think he should keep that streak going. Let's make it 10 games, through 11 games, through 12 games. Let's keep the young man going.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, he's off to a good start. I think, we talked a little bit about Dyson Daniels earlier, but I think he's done really well with some of the minutes. By the way, too, career high in scoring for him on Sunday. He had 17 points on 7 for 12 from the field. And also, I think he had a bunch of stats that were really good. 9 rebounds, 4 assists, but how about 3 for 6 3-point shooting?
I think that's something that a lot of people were not expecting out of Dyson. And I still think people who haven't watched a lot of Dyson yet, they see it come out of his hands like, oh no. And then it goes in like, oh, if you can unlock that with his physicality, that's a little something different.
And he's still working on his shot. He mentioned this a few days ago. I think after practice, he talked about how, he's still getting comfortable. Yeah. He redid his shot. They basically kind of changed the way he shoots
redid everything, his body, his hair, his shot.
Yeah, there you go.
Dyson.
So if he can keep making improvements in the 3-point area, I think that'll be a big help. But yeah, I wanted to kind of go through just briefly some of the areas where, we can just look at some of these black and white numbers. I'm not going to get too deep into the stats and stuff like that, but just kind of generally, Dyson Daniels, I mentioned his 3-point shooting. If he can keep getting better, that's going to help the team overall. But we know realistically that to really get where you want to go in that category, you need C.J. McCollum and Trey Murphy back on the court.
Yes.
We're hoping to see both of those guys at some point in the near future. Right now, the Pelicans are 21st in 3-point makes per game, and they're also 22nd in 3-point percentage. So I feel like, it almost goes without saying that if CJ was off to a great start.
Right.
When you get Trey Murphy on the court, those categories are going to improve a ton.
Of course.
Another area, and by the way, too, before I get too far into some of this stuff, Naji Marshall made his season debut Sunday, which was great to see.
Yeah.
I think he's still shaking off the rust a little bit. He provided some good energy. He had 8 points in 14 minutes, and he did a lot of the stuff he did was right off the bat, right when he first checked into the game.
And Naji does a lot of dirty work that doesn't show up on a stat sheet too, and just the identity he brings to the team. It was just great to see him out there in general.
Right, but I think he had a couple turnovers where he was just going really fast.
Yeah.
And he plays like that sometimes, but I do feel like that was kind of he hasn't been on the court in a month.
Right.
And he'll clean up some of that stuff as he just gets more time in uniform and just gets back into more of a rhythm.
Right.
Pelicans are 23rd in defense right now. They were top 10 pretty much all of last season.
Yeah.
Herb Jones hasn't played the last couple games.
Yes.
So, don't know what his status is for Tuesday. And as we record this Monday morning, the injury report should be out maybe around 4:30 Monday afternoon.
Right.
And so we'll get an update on what his status is for the game against Dallas. I don't know if there's a team in the league where you need him more than the Mavericks, where like we talked about with the game that Luka and Kyrie had where they combined for 65 points. They were 11 for 19 on threes, 24 for 38 from the field. So need Herb Jones. Don't know whether he's going to be back on Tuesday or not, but hopefully I think he was listed as questionable before the Sunday game. So hopefully he'll be making progress and we'll see him.
Yeah, I've got my fingers and toes and everything else I can crossed.
For sure. And then lastly, Pelicans are 21st in assist to turnover ratio. I was actually surprised. I thought that was actually going to be a little bit lower than it was when I looked it up, but still not great. You're in the bottom 10 of the league, and then you have a guy like Jose Alvarado who still hasn't played yet this season. I know because I've heard people say it to me that there's tons of people out there that are like, God, we can't wait for Jose to be back on the court because at the end of games and even throughout the flow of the regular part of the game, just having somebody who has that point guard background who can get you organized, get you into the offense will help a ton. Not just with the turnovers that come specifically from that position, but I feel like the team as a whole commits more turnovers because sometimes there's guys in positions where the shot clock is running down. It's like I have to make a quick decision, and they're throwing bad passes. Just having that steadying presence of Jose, even if it's, I think he averaged 20-ish minutes a game last year. Even just having those 20 minutes where you can
it's a well-defined role.
People down and get everything, like I said, organized. So anyways, that's my laundry list of multiple guys. I really hope, Naji was a start. I hope that list gets shorter and shorter as we go forward.
Yeah, Jim, that is great Jimfo, man. And I feel, and again, it's easy to get down right now. The Pelicans have lost 5 straight. However, it is an early season.
I tried the best I could, Joe.
I feel better.
I feel better too.
I was in a shambles before you came in.
I definitely understand that. Because I feel this way too, that it's like, there's only a certain amount of patience that you have, and I think the time is definitely now to get this turned around. We saw last season what happens in terms of how much one win or one game can make a difference in your seeding. So, hopefully with a bunch of home games coming up, even against some really good competition, we can start to see some better performances, and they need to get as many wins as they can.
Yeah, and we've seen the people coming out to the home games. We do appreciate you coming out in not so ideal weather and some of these tough games. I do have to say a lot of people gave me a sad thumbs down through the radio studio window. You may have seen that.
Yeah.
If you ever see the guy walking past the Smoothie King Center there pushing buttons, that's generally me. And a lot of y'all gave me a little sad thumbs down, maybe a tear going down your face, finger. I appreciated that. I want to feel your emotion. I am with you through the window. I just cannot play point guard. You don't want to see me out there. But if I could, I would, Jim. Jim's been giving me pointers. He's dunking on me all the time.
I like your attitude, man.
Yeah, I'm trying. And we will continue to try for you. Thank you for listening to the Pelicans Podcast. That is Mr. Jim Eichenhofer. I am Joe Cardosi. Tell your friends and pals to give it a listen. And, hey, we will talk to you once again on Wednesday, hopefully with some good news. And until then, go Pels!
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here